Welcome again to today's class. We're continuing work on the Interim Progress Report. On the last day, we had covered up to the requirements analysis. So today, we're just going to do a small recap of the requirements and in terms of what to include in your Interim Progress Report as well. So as mentioned, the requirements analysis are the full list of functionalities that you're going to perform. All right. Now, again, I reiterate, don't limit this to what you think you can do. This here is your selling point to show the complexity of the project. So from the very beginning, you had an aim that speaks of complexity. Well, your requirements analysis will also add to that level of complexity because your aim is just one part of it. But when they look at the requirements of the project, it should spell advanced features. Now, you would have already created a list of your core and advanced features. So this here is that list as well. Now, so you have your list of core and advanced, but last week I showed you how to write your requirements analysis in detail, where you describe the requirements looking more like this here. So where you, for each requirement, you have give it a requirement number, a description, etc. Of course, right, you would have a table with a summary of your requirements. Something like this. So this table is your summary of your requirements, but if you wish, you could merge this table here, that's this table, you could merge it with this other table here. So what you simply do, if you're merging the two tables in one, the other table has the requirement. Let me just highlight, annotate. The previous table has the requirement number, requirement name, it has the number, it has whether it's core or advanced, so you can add that here. And it also has, but it doesn't have the description or the rationale, but it indicated who could access it, whether all persons or only the administrator, only the student or the teacher could access it, right? So based on that, you can actually, instead of having two separate tables, you could merge both as one, or you could keep them separate. There's no right and wrong, it's just a choice of style. But the main thing is in your IPR, when you list your requirements, you better make sure that you list all of them as possible, right? Now, what happens is that because you are provided with samples, now I can't go and change those students' projects, but in some of the sample, if a student did it poorly, because you are using it as a sample, you do it poorly as well. So I want to show an example here. This is the functional requirements for this student, right? So this functional requirement here, this is the full list of requirement provided by the student. This is a basic list here. And this is not what I'm asking you to do. I have been asking you guys to give a full detail list. You need to sell your project. Now, if you look at the feedback from Mina, right? She says, what about course creation and content management? Think about the 3 C's when developing a community website. Content, who will generate this? Who will manage it? So you're not saying, so communication, how will communication take place? Messages, email, collaboration, etc. These are basic core requirements which will only give you an overall very good, if fully implemented. If you want to achieve an excellent, outstanding grade, you also need to think of advanced functionality requirements such as search, sort, filter, user profile with account monitoring and tracking, right? Okay, so these are some of the things she is recommending. And again, and the thing is, he had those in his full list, but he never put it here simply because he decided I'll just give a subset of what it is. You don't do that. This has to sell your project. So they are judging based on this. Are we clear therefore that when you're writing your interim progress report and you're putting your list of requirements, you give them your detailed list with all the stuff, including, and you have your column including core or advanced, right? Indicating which ones are core, which ones are advanced. So if you could kindly ensure that all of these are included and you sell your requirements, please. Even if you want to put your description, a column for the description and your rationale, it will take a lot more fitting, but if you do so, at least the fact is that you need to have your full complete list so that they can easily see this as a lot of advanced features as well. Okay. So
Well,
Sheldon, go ahead.
The acronym EPP, what is that? What it stands for?
EPP is simply extended project proposal. So before you guys did it, the project proposal included the literature review, a detailed literature review, right? So we call it extended project proposal, which is EPP. when you guys had to do it, when Gani took over the module, right? So for some students in this group, some of them would have done project proposal like a year and a half to 2 years ago. Gani took over this in the last 2 offerings or so, and he has made some wonderful changes. What he did was, instead of making it into a big assignment, he split it into 2 smaller ones, more digestible, giving you more time to do each one. So what he did was he split the EPP into 2. He removed the literature review, and the literature review became your third assignment, and everything else remained, and he called it the other one project proposal. So your project proposal became your assignment 2, and the literature review became your assignment 3. So that is why you had two separate assignments on this. Well, forgetting the initial one, which is the PowerPoint slides. What previously they did, the EPP was your project proposal. It was called EPP because the E stand for Extended Project Proposal, and it included both literature review and the project proposal. So that's what. So whenever you see EPP, note it's also project proposal. Good?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right. Any other question before we move on as well? Okay, wonderful. So now we're going back to our slides. We've covered the requirements analysis. As I said, go to town with your requirements analysis. Don't sell yourself short. I've given you in the slides as well a list of core and advanced functionalities. Use them. Use them, please, because at the end of it, you remember this is theory that you're selling. You're selling the concept of what is a difficult or a simple project. So feel free to have as many advanced features as well, please. Good. All right. After the requirements have been done, so you have your functional and your non-functional, and please pay attention to the comments that you're seeing from Mina, because I gave you all those projects are all on the drive as well, right? And look at her comments, and she has stuff that I don't have on the slide, and factor in those as well, especially if she's your supervisor. So after completing the requirements analysis now, our next section is the design. Now, in terms of the design, I'm separating the design of the database from the design of the application. So they both design, but they are 2 different parts of design. So one is design of the back end, which is the database, and then you have the design of the front end. So what goes into each? Well, the design of the back end is really the whole purpose of the design of the back end is for you to come up with your list of tables. So given that's the case, we will look at the ER diagram, and from the ER diagram, we will normalize it by removing any many-to-many relations, and then from there, we'll come up with a logical model, and from the logical model, we'll come up with our data dictionary. The data dictionary basically is your list of tables and their attributes, and once you have that, you can now go and create that in Access or whatever software using for your database, right? Okay, so I believe you all are using MAMP, and in MAMP
Yes.
has an SQL database. So you will create your database from there. But anything you do in MAMP, that is implementation.
Ravi,
Yeah,
it's
correct.
seeing that we are working at on the artifact, and we are doing the actual coding before we actually did some of this pre-work. In terms of the ER, I really didn't do an ER. What example we're going to use for ER? Can I speak to you after? Do you have an ER that I can use as a base? Because basically we're waiting on what Marcus helping us to develop, but we are doing the actual coding before we actually do what we're, normally what is done, which is the groundwork of the actual
And take
write-up.
a look at the screen.
Yeah,
What's the heading?
good.
It's already in the slides. So this is my
Okay,
rule, right? So I will work with you on the ER diagram. But the truth is,
okay.
when Marcus works with you, remember the reason why we're doing it like this, right? Because if we go to wait until we finish everything and get to the implementation,
Understood. Yeah,
you will only have like 5 classes with Marcus, and there's only so much you can do. So we
understood.
are doing it in parallel. So you're going to basically do a little reverse engineering, right?
Okay.
So we'll come to this shortly. So
Okay, good,
today's
good.
class, when we look at the design of the database design, we will look at the ER diagram. And I do have an ER diagram there for you, which you could customize. But
Okay,
what you do as well, as Marcus develops, you can
make changes.
changes accordingly, right? But I've given you like a complete comprehensive ER that probably caters a function that you don't have. So the things that you
Okay,
don't need, you could remove if you don't need them.
okay,
Good?
okay, good.
All
Good,
right.
thanks.
No
Thanks.
problem. And then we have the design of the application. And the design of the application is the screens, right? So for the
Yes.
design of the application, the end result of your design of the application. So I want you to see what I'm going to cover first before I cover it. At the end of the design, you are going to come up with screens like this, right? So this is the purpose of this, the front end design, to be able to come up with your interactive prototype. Now, please note these slides were not included in the one I initially sent you. I added them on, right? So if you go again, everything is on the shared drive, right? Whenever I make updates, I make it to the shared drive, and you always have access to the shared drive. So whenever you want, you just go to the shared drive. But I will always, when I make a change, I will email that change to you all as well after. Good? Okay, so let's get back. So these are some of the things we'll be covering. Notice as well, you're seeing pictures of the tables, what they're going to look like. So those are things we are going to cover in today's session. So let's start now with our design. And our first set is the design of the database, right? So in terms of the design chapter will include the ER diagram. It will include your logical design as well as the wireframes. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's get started. Now, in terms of the notes you're going to include in your write-up, the notes you will include will basically narrate a bit of what it is you're going to do. Now, please note, everything you do here, you will be creating when you do your final report. So this is your interim report. When we move to the final report, you will have a chapter called the design chapter, and it will include these ER diagram you're doing. It will include all the logical model. Everything here is going to be used again in your design chapter. So that is why it's called the interim progress report, because you're showing them the progress you've made towards completing a final report. But the how you're presenting it in your IPR is not the same as your chapters in your final report. You're just simply narrating through all the things that you would have done. And when we move to the final report, we will have separate chapters for each. For here now in the interim, we don't need to put it as separate chapters, right? So what would you write in your IPR, right, to talk about the ER diagram or the design phase? So I will briefly introduce in terms of the work done in the design chapter. So I will talk about, so using this slide here, I will briefly discuss that the design before the application is built, the design will cover the design of the database as well as the design of the application, right? And therefore, in terms of the database design, we look at the ER diagram as well as the logical model and the tables as well. So, and then when we start the ER now process, this is what we do. Now, please note, when you're building an ER diagram, you start thinking of, look at your functional requirements. Look at all the things that you need to store. Your functional requirements tells you what you need to, what your functions or features you're having. And then for each of those functions or features, you need to have tables in order to store the information. So using the functional requirements, you use that to create your ER diagram. So in writing it, this is along the line of what you will see. The first step in the design process involved identifying the entities and the list of data that would need to be stored. The requirements analysis provided most of the information for this phase in the development process, as functional requirements form the basis of the data required. Just to reiterate, your functional requirements will tell you, look, I need to register a person. So if registration is a functional requirement, what data do you need to collect from the user to register them? So you would need to collect their username, their password, that sort of thing. So I need a table to store those information. So I need a users table. So that is how the user requirements lead to or the functional requirements lead to your entities. Another one will be, you want to register for courses. So you need to have courses, you need to store courses. So you need an entity called courses. And for each course, you need a course name, the course ID, a description of the course, that sort of thing. A course now is made up of, like, let's say chapters, and chapters are made up of units. So you need to have tables for those. And that is how, from your requirements, you will then move into your ER diagram. Good. So from here now, from your requirements analysis, you need to list now the different entities you have and just a few attributes. You're not listing all the attributes here. An entity, first of all, is anything that you're storing information about. Anything that you're storing information about. So what I want to do, an example of an entity is the user's entity. And for the users, you need their email address or username and password. For customers, you need their name, phone, date of birth, right? This is just examples, not necessarily for yours, right? Let's look at the functional requirements and let's see if you could come up now with some of the entities just using some of these things here. So we're going back to this here, right? Let's look at registration and login. In order to log in, what information do you need to log in?
Well, as you mentioned, you need a username, a password.
Right. So those are two things you need for logging in, username, password, and we need to store that somewhere. So what table will be the best table to store that? Any suggestion from you guys? Come on, guys. I need some more interaction from you all, please, if it's all right.
Users.
Users table is fine. You could call it by any name, but users table is most common. Now, in the users table, so we know we have username, password, but do we need anything else? So let's look at registration. When a person registers, their information is going to be stored in the users table as well. So what are some of the things you will store when you're registering a person? Can you suggest any, apart from username and password, could you store any other thing when they're registering?
Email address.
Email address. Come on, we can get a few more.
First name, last name, date of birth.
Right. So good. So we have some ideas. So those are some of the attributes you will put. Now, do you need to list all the attributes when you're doing your discussion on the AR diagram? And the answer is no. When you're writing your discussion, you just put a few. It's just to get the idea that what it will store. So when someone is reading it, they know what you mean. Let's look at course authoring. What is course authoring? Can anyone suggest to me or describe what you think course authoring function is?
I'll be creating a course.
Correct. You are creating a course. Now, whose role it is to create the course? Is it the student, the lecturer? Which user in your system is creating the course?
The lecturer, the teacher.
Right. So the lecturer is doing that. Now, so what they're doing is creating a course. Do you think, therefore, a course is an entity? Now, to answer that before you do, what an entity is, to be an entity, you must be able to store data about it. So, for example,
Yes.
users was an entity because you could store username, password, etc. So you could store information about it. Can you store anything about a course?
Yes, a course is an entity.
But what are you storing? And people, I want more than Sheldon. Sheldon, I'm grateful, and please, I'm not trying to. I want to get others
I
involved.
understand.
I need,
understand.
right? Come on, guys. I have a class here. Sheldon alone. Otherwise, I'll teach Sheldon separately. Come on, you can all answer as well, right? What are some of the things you will store about a course?
Course ID and course name.
Very good. So you have the course ID.
Course description.
Fantastic. So course ID, course name, the description, all of those things. Now, if you're selling your courses, it might even have a price date as well, right? Fitting. So those are starting examples and those are excellent. Now, also in terms of the course authoring is not just creating the course, but also building the content for it as well, right? Remember, like when you log into StudyNet, right? And you see a list of courses. When you click on a course now, you're drilling down into the course detail, right? Or the module detail. So within a module on StudyNet, how is it broken down into? Can you remember how StudyNet or Canvas has the modules broken down into? So you start, a module is a course.
They have units.
Right, and a module is made up of units. And a unit is further broken down into maybe sessions or whatever as well. But the fact is that that's the structure of a course. So you have a course now is made up of units. You don't have to call it units. You could call it chapters. You could call it whatever you want to call it, however you choose to break it up into, right? That is how you can do it, right? Next, so if you look at unit, what information will we store about a unit? So a course is made up of units. What information would you store on units?
The title of the unit.
Good. The unit will have a title, right? It will have a description as well, right? Okay. And of course, the unit will link back to the course. Is it possible a unit could belong to multiple courses?
It is possible, and a unit may have a duration.
Good. So you may have, so you can have a duration for it. And correct, depending on how you build your course, a unit from one, because they are overlapping in course. Have you noticed as well, like sometimes you did a topic in one course and you also covered it in another course you did many years ago in another program? And the answer is a unit could be covered in multiple courses. So it's possible a unit could be in many courses and a course will have many units, right? Good. And then a unit now could be further broken down into whether it is whatever you want to describe it as, content or whatever you want to describe it as. So all of that is part of your course description. Sorry about that, guys. When I didn't put it on silent, right? All right. Okay. So that's course authoring. Apart from that, now then you have course registration. What is course registration? And it's not the same as course authoring. Course authoring is creating a course. What is course registration?
Students signing up for a course.
Right. So do we need to store anything about that when a student signs up or registers for a course?
Yes, you
Can you say yes?
registration date.
Right. So you need to, so in that table, you should have the course ID. It will have the student ID or user ID. It will have the day they registered for it as well. Right. So those are just some of the details you're going to have. So now I'm not going to spend, but what I'm trying to show you is the process from where you take your requirements, and from your requirements now, you use that to come up with your list of entities. Right. So the process I was just doing, you have to use that as well to come up with your entities. Now, based on that now, this list of entities is then translated into a conceptual ER diagram to show how each entity is related. Now, this is an example entity that Marcus had initially provided that I just updated with the relationship. I'm putting this on screen show now so that you can see it a little better. I know it's a little bit blurry as well, right?
Ravi, I haven't checked, but do you have that in soft copy in terms of I can manipulate it and enter and change, and what
Unfortunately,
application I
but
use?
all I got is a screenshot, like a picture Marcus sent me. So what I did was I took the picture, put it in Paint, and then I add the one and M's and all of that to it to add it to my slide.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Good.
Sorry about that. Now,
All right,
what we're going to do, so Marcus might have it as well. So if you want Marcus, because Marcus initially provided me with the diagram, and then I just simply add the ones and M's. When you look at it, you can see the one and M is kind of like, it's not the same font and all of that as the others, right? Okay. So I want to describe a bit about the different entities and let's understand it a bit more, because these now you could work backward. If you have your ER diagram, you could be able to work backward to then go back to this slide where you talk about the entities, right? So yes.
I have one question. In back in that diagram, the one is like one connection or one relationship, and M is many.
Well, I'm going to explain the one and the M now. So I'll tell you what the one means and what the M means. Now, in terms of ER diagram, there's something called foreign keys. That this is called the relational model. The relational model is when you create your tables, in order to link them, right, you need to have what you call a foreign key, right? So the foreign key is how you link your tables. Now, because you all already started creating the tables with Marcus, are you all familiar with the concept of what a foreign key is? Because you would have done web scripting as well, and you would have had tables there as well, right?
Actually, we did the web scripting. We would have a key field that was the ID, but to say we actually, at least me, I didn't go, we didn't go into details. So I didn't go into details. We just had the key fields, which was the customer ID. But in terms of foreign fields and linking it, I can't,
no
maybe
problem.
the others did it.
No, that's okay. So I'm happy once anyone doesn't understand. So I don't want to take for granted that even if you covered it and you're not sure, I'm happy to explain. Because the fact is, guys, is that I don't want you to feel embarrassed to tell me, look, I really don't understand, because I want to, my role is not just to present only, but to help you as much as I can to understand some of the different concepts as well, right? So based on this, just to guide you a bit, right? Let's start with the users here. The users is your central table, and in your users, these are some attributes. Now, you don't need to necessarily have all of them. Each of them have a role that they play, but you can decide whether what you want or what you don't want. So for example, Marcus has a table for avatars where a user could have, right? So a user will have one avatar at a time, but you could reuse those avatars as often as you wish, right? If you don't want to implement the avatars or don't want to consider it, you could leave it out. So this here was really made to cater for almost everything, pretty much, well, most things. So therefore, if some of these you don't have as requirements, you could remove as accordingly. So just to give you an idea now, so you have your users. This is your users here. You have your user ID, username, etc. Right? And I'm going to explain the concept of the 1 and the M, etc. So let's take a look at review. So you have user, and a user is linked to a review, right? So this is your review table here. Now let's understand the role or the relationship between user and review. Now, the only time you ever draw a line to connect two entities is if there's a direct relationship between them. Now, in terms of this here, a user and a review, are you all familiar with what a review is? Like you could review a product, you could give a review on a course, etc., right? So in this case here, a review is for a course. So this is the course table over here, right? This is the course table, and this is a review on the course. So what we're showing here is a user makes a review, and that review is for a course. So that is this link here. User makes a review is for a course. But I want to explain the 1 and the M. In terms of the, let's start from the user side in describing. So from a user perspective, so taking a user, can a user make one review, or a user can make many reviews? What are your thoughts? Can a user only do one review, or a user can make many reviews?
Many reviews.
Many reviews, right? So based on that, a user can make many reviews, and that's why the many is on the opposite side. So we start at the user side, and from the user side, the value goes on the opposite end. So a user makes many reviews. Now, remember, when you're starting, always use singular terms. Don't say many users. Many users will always give you many on the other side. Always start with singular. So always say a user, or a or an or each, or terms like those, but singular terms. So a user can make many reviews, and that is why many is on the side here. Now let's look at the review side. So we're going the other way now, from review to user. A review, if you take a review from the table, if I take a specific review, that review is made by how many users? If I take a particular review or particular post, that post was made by how many persons? One. Each post is made by one person. Now the truth is, several people could post the same thing, but I'm not concerned about what was said. I'm looking at the specific post and the specific review. That specific review was made by one user. And so that is a bit of the 1 and the M. Let's do another one as well. So that's just one example here. Let's look at course and review. Let's go from course and review. A course can have, so each course or a course can have just one review or many reviews?
Many.
Correct. A course can have many reviews, and that is why many comes here. So a course can have many reviews. So that's why this many is. Now let's figure out the other way now. If you go from a review, when you look at a specific review, that review is for one course. A specific review is made on one course. So that specific review is for one course. So for example, if you go on a blog and you post, so for example, you go on Facebook, right? Every comment, when you make a comment, that comment is related to one post or one picture or something like that. But you could make that same comment many different times, but each time you make the comment, it's for a specific post and it's made by a specific user. So that's why the review is for that course, one course, and reviews for made by one user, right? Let's look at another case here now. Now, in terms of course, you may say, well, why didn't we have a link between user and course? Can a user enroll in a course? Yes, they can. A user can enroll in many courses or just one course? Can a user enroll in many courses or just one course only? And the answer is many. At the same time, from the course side, a course can have many users enrolling in it. So the relation between a user and a course is many to many. So that is why what I did was I remove all the many-to-manys from the diagram, and what I have here is what you call a normalized ER diagram, because I remove the many-to-many. Normally, when we start, we will show that a user is linked to the course, but it's a many-to-many relation. And because it's a many-to-many relation, you have to split it, right? So that is where the enrollment comes in. So that is where enroll comes in now. So the enrollment is to split the many-to-many between users and course. So
Ravi,
yeah,
can you give us some notes on, because I think we may have to explain that the fact that you talk about the normalizing, and could you give us like a couple of lines so that we could explain this in our report?
So what I will do, when I'm finished this year, I will arrange a separate class to teach you a bit on normalization.
I think that's important.
Help you to think. So because this specific class was not made to teach normalization per se, but is to cover the IPR specifically, I do have exactly what you're saying here, which is the normalization. I have slides that discuss the normalization process, right? Okay, so I have slides for those, but what we will do, I will teach you the process of normalization so that you're not just writing about normalization, you understand it in order to write it. So I will teach you that in a separate class. So if you'd like, next week, Tuesday, so today's class, I will cover the IPR, and the next few weeks, you just need to work on writing an IPR. But what I will do, next week, I can have a class that teaches you on normalization, right? So I will cover the things that you need additional help in. So IPR would have been covered already. So now I'll just talk to you to teach you normalization in general. Good? So this is your general write-up on the ER diagram. Then you have your ER diagram here. So let's look at some of the entities now. So like you have users. This looks at badges as well. So you can have many badges. You have badges here. And a user can acquire, these are the badges acquired by a user. Of course, a user can acquire many badges, but each badge acquired is for a specific user and for a specific badge, but a badge could be acquired many times, right? This here handles discussion, so collaboration, that's for this feature here. This is like group members. If you have groups, so if you could create groups and stuff in it, right? If your course has grouping, etc., you could use this for it. This one is collaboration, like the discussion forum, right? Discussion and responses. This is your discussion forum here. This is your course. A course is made up of units, and a unit is made up of material. So this here is the course content part of it. So if you have course authoring, it will have a course is made up of, so you have a course made up of units, and units is made up of all lessons or chapters, however you want, and that is made up of materials, right? Now, these are exercises here. So this part here is the assessment part. So this part, this set of tables here is the assessment. So what we did was you could create a table with a series of questions. So what you do is you could add questions generally to the table. The question, so it's just like a pool of questions that you have here. And each question has like, they have the difficulty levels, etc. Now, this here is simply a series of questions. But what you do is when you're teaching a class, you could create an exercise, and that exercise now is made up of questions from your question table. So what your question table is, this table here is like a pool of questions. So just 1 second for me, guys. Just give me 1 second. All right. So this here is like a pool of questions that you have. So that pool of questions could be hundreds of questions you create. But what you do now, in order for your units here, or for your different units, you could create exercises. So a unit could have many exercises, but this exercise was created for a specific unit. Now this exercise now is made up of questions from the question table. So an exercise can have many questions, and a question could be used in many exercises. So this is another example of a many-to-many, and you split it now by creating the exercise questions. So these are the specific questions in the exercise, okay? Now, when a user is enrolled, they will attempt these exercises. So this is when a person is enrolled, and you actually make an attempt at the exercise. This is each of your attempt is stored here. And your attempt now, so each attempt you make is stored here, and your attempt, you'll have your marks and stuff for each attempt. And when you make an attempt at a test, these are your actual answers to each question in the test. So these are your individual responses. when you do a test, so each attempt you make is here, but each attempt you'll have your responses. And these are your responses here to each question. So this here is the e-assessment part of it, right? And this is your course authoring part of it, right? Etc. This is your gamification with badges here, right? This is like your avatars, etc. This is your collaboration part here, right? And this is if, for example, you want to make purchases of stuff, you can include that here if required. And those are the different aspects of your ER diagram. Good. So what I can do with you, if you'd like, I can do one-on-one session with you all as well when you are doing your diagram to answer the questions you want for your requirements, to see what you need to remove, what you need to add, etc. So all I need for you to use to schedule those sessions with me as well, where we will discuss these, right?
No problem. I'll do that.
Good. And that's available for everyone as well. These are other ER diagrams for like booking systems and stuff. I didn't take it all from the slide just in case if we change the theme, I don't have to find it again. It's in the slides, right? Now, in order to draw your ER diagram, these are some different software you could use. They're free. Lucidchart, ER diagram, SmartDraw. Those are some, or even Microsoft Visio. Those are some software tools you could use to draw your ER diagram. After this, now you have to discuss your logical schema. So following the completion of the normalization process, a logical model of the database was constructed. This includes each table and attributes, as well as integrity constraint, which is your primary and foreign keys as well. So figure 6 below shows the logical schema for my project. Now, just wanting to note, right, your logical schema is where for each table, you list all the attributes. And when you list all the attributes, now you put an asterisk by the foreign keys. Now, just to go back to your ER diagram, I want to explain the concept of foreign keys here, right? Now, whenever you have a one-to-many relation, the question now becomes which one has the foreign key. And the rule is the foreign key is always stored on the many side. So let's take a look at users and reviews, right? The many side, the review is the many side. So the review is the many side. So what this means is that the review table will store the primary key of the one side. The one side is users. So the reviews table will have the user ID. So your one side is the user. So just in this example, the many side is reviews. The one side is users. The rule is the primary key of the one is users and the primary key is user ID. So the primary key of the one is stored as a foreign key on the many. The primary key of the one is stored as a foreign key of the many. So in terms of users and review is the many. So review table have the primary key from users table, which is user ID. So if you look at reviews table, you see user ID. Let's look at another example. Courses and reviews. There's a one-to-many relation here. The many side is reviews. So it means if the many side always gets the foreign key, so the many side will store the primary key of the one, which is course ID. So course ID is the primary key of the one side. So course ID is stored as a foreign key in the reviews table. Good. So that's the general rule of thumb with storing foreign keys. Again, I'll cover that when we do ER diagrams in a session next week. So based on that now, your logical schema will have each table and the attributes. Now, please note, even if you don't understand it, here, I've already listed all the table with all the foreign keys and everything. So all you have to do is go to the table and it has all the attributes. You could remove, well, Marcus did it to be quite honest. So you could remove the ones that you don't want, any attribute you don't want to add what you need. But please note, you know, you cannot remove foreign keys like that easily, right? You have the foreign keys are required when you're joining your tables, etc. But all the tables and the attributes are already listed here. All you have to do, so I have it in this format here. All you're doing it now is for your logical schema, you put it in this format. So each entity becomes a table and these are the attributes and this is your logical schema. Good. The next step from your logical schema is to create a data dictionary, right? Okay, but I didn't include the data dictionary here, but the data dictionary will normally be the next step where for each table you put the field size and all of those, right? So those are
Well,
Yeah.
can we see the logical schema for the reviews? Do you have did you include that?
I didn't put all because it was simply to copy it from that to here. So this has a review over here, right? This is an example, but this is for course booking system. Review ID, course ID. But I didn't complete the exercise because ideally the students can go to the table there, and for each table I've already listed it. But this is an example of review. Review ID, course ID, user ID, review date, etc. You seeing it here? This
Yeah.
is an example. This is a course booking system, though. Eh? This is a course booking system which for Cool. All right. Now, so this covers the back end design. Now you have to look at the front end design, and your front end design is really the screens. So what you're going to do now you already started designing like a couple of the features, but the truth is the proper process is that you should be designing it on paper and then on the computer, and then after, you know, like with software, and then after you start coding. That's the normal proper process. So if you follow the normal proper process, in designing a low fidelity prototype now, what you may do, you could start using sketches or wireframe drawings as well, right? As an approach to doing it, your front end design. So one approach here is you use wireframe where you create sketches of each screen, right? So this here is like a sketch of the screen. This sketch doesn't include color. It's not focused so much on terms of, but it has like a high level layout, right? And in terms of generally what goes where, so you can see the general layout of the page. You should be able to do stuff like this, and there are software. The thing is that there are software you could use that already have a lot of these that you could use from, right? So these are what you call wireframes, right? So this is part of your low fidelity prototype. Now, one of the recommendation with your wireframe is that in your wireframe, you normally will have like words to describe. If you click here where you will go, so you're describing how it will work. So you have a picture of the screen, a low level picture, and you indicate, okay, this will have your username, your password. If you click on sign in here, right, it will go to the, once you sign in, it goes to the login page, and this is your login page. So it shows you the linkages, right, etc. So this is a low fidelity prototype. So you have, this is an example of registering. So registering would be, so if you click register from the login page as well, it takes you to here. So you're seeing how the pages are linked. So this is a hyperlink. If you click, it goes to the registration page. Notice the registration page. You can tell which page it is because the title is clear on each page, etc. So this is your registration page where you enter your email, your password, confirm password, etc. Right? So when the user clicks register, it takes them to the profile page, etc. This is how your wireframes might look. Okay, so what you're doing is you're doing sketches of your screen. And this is another example of another sketch for login and registration, right, etc. So this is like your home page, etc. And notice you have a lot of description. So your wireframes usually are filled with description, describing to the user, if you click this way, you will go, etc. Right? But it helps you to see the layout. You would need to do this for several of your screens. Good? After this now, just a note, this is a list of free resources here, this wireframes to go. If you go on this website, they have ready to use interface components that you could use built using Balsamiq, right? So if you go here, and I encourage you to go here as well, use the link, and you can get a lot of free resources as well, right? And some of those screens you might be able to reuse in yours without having to design from scratch, okay? So that's to make it easier for you all. Now, apart from the wireframes, I added this interactive prototype. Now, if any one of you have done the UXD module, I don't think any one of you have, right? Or maybe one or two of you only. If you did the user experience design module, you would have done interactive prototypes. What interactive prototype is, it's this same low-level prototype. There's software such as Balsamiq or Axure as well you could use to develop screens that actually look like the real thing. So this here looks like the actual screen. It has and when you click, it actually goes to the other. So it's not programming. It's basically what you call an interactive prototype that you could interact with, so that if you could enter, it goes to the other screens as well, but it doesn't do any validation, any real processing. It doesn't do any processing, but it helps you to see what your screens would look like, and it could take you through the navigation, etc. So before you actually build the application, you have a flow of what it looks like. These screens look real, right? And these are actual examples as well that, that recommended. So this is what it looks like on a mobile device. And there's software, again, you could use for building these. All of these will help. So in terms of your write-up for interactive prototype, this is an example. Wireframes are static design. They are generally accompanied by annotations to say what happens when an area is clicked. But actually clicking won't do anything. So as part of further refinement of the design, an interactive prototype was used for the project. This is what you call a high fidelity prototype, having styling, colors, logos, contents, and they're interactive. Therefore, when you click or tap on an element or design, something happens, a drop down occurs, a link to jump to a new page, and so on. And it allows seeing how the design will work, and therefore the design becomes more tangible and easier to understand, right? And therefore you could mention, so basically that's your write-up for your interactive prototype of your application, and you can discuss the screens that you develop the interactive prototype for. You could even mention as well how it helps you to change certain things as well. So maybe because when you start doing the interactive prototype, you realize some of the things you had or the original concept you had in terms of how they will link is not the best approach. So you have made changes based on the interactive prototype. So this is your interactive prototype, and that concludes the design element of the interim progress report. So for your interim progress report now, for the design chapter, you will have your ER diagram, you'll have your logical model, you'll have your wire, so that's your back end. And for the front end, you could use wireframes and your interactive design. Good. Next, we go to implementation. Now, implementation is focusing on all the stuff Marcus has done with you guys, right? So even though you don't have it on your live system, wherever it is, please take screenshots and include it, because remember, you're not actually demoing the application to them as yet. You will just include screenshots. So every day when Marcus builds something, you take your screenshots and you incorporate it, because in the end, you want to show that these functions were built as well as you go along. So every time Marcus does a function, keep a list of your functional requirements and indicate if you built it or not, right? So you can track whether it's 100% complete, etc. So for the implementation, you are going to focus on all the different functionalities that you've covered. Now, in writing up your implementation chapter, you need to provide evidence. You cannot make claims that you did the whole thing and there's nothing, no screens to show for it. So you need to supplement whatever you say here or support it with actual screenshots of the screens that you have developed from the classes that you're doing. Good. So here's what we recommend. So in your implementation, what should you include in your IPR? My recommendation when writing this is, 1, discuss the installation and configuration of the software. Were there any problems? Was it a straightforward process, etc.? Next, after you install the software, did you have to create a special folder to store all your files, right? Is that ringing a bell? Did you all have any problems when you all had to install and configure the software, first of all? Yes or no?
No.
No problems, right? Next.
No, not really.
When you all install the software now, for this project now that Marcus is working for you, did you have to create a folder to store all your code and all of that for that project, so that when you have to backup, you backup the whole folder? Or is
Yes,
the files all?
yes, I my project have multiple folders for different things.
So you will have multiple folders, but you'll have a root folder from which
Yes.
everything is stored in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Right. So that root folder will have many subfolders, but that root folder is the project that he's starting from. So he created that root folder that you'll back up. So all of these are things that you're discussing and why, right? So it's not just say what you did, but discuss why you're doing it as well. Because you see that folder that you're creating in Eclipse or WAMP or wherever you're creating it, that folder can be easily backed up, because if anything goes wrong, once you have that folder, you can now implement that on another machine, right? Then after that, you have to create the database tables. How many tables have you guys created so far?
1 for me, login. Well, user. That's all I
Users
did.
table, right? And as he goes along and he adds more function, he'll create more and more tables, right? Okay, next. So this is the implementation of the back end. After that now, so this is the back-end implementation. Now you go to the features, which is the front end. So using your functional requirements now, state the features you've implemented to date. Now in stating the features, you should discuss and include any snippet of coding, like for any special thing you did. So like, for example, you all build the registration page.
Yes.
Right. In the registration page, did you do have to do like password to confirm the password and the confirm password match, etc.? Did you do any of those?
We didn't go in depth as yet with that. We just did the basics.
Good. But is there any code you have to use to get it? Like when they enter the information on the date on the form to get it stored in your table, you have to use some bit of code so that you copy the information from the form into the actual user's table. That should be part of the form, right? Good. So what I'm trying to get here, when every
Can I ask a question?
go right ahead.
Even the code that we submit, we could always change the code, right?
Of course, you could
Because
always change it. This is just interim. You could change up everything. You could even change your project if you wish as well.
Because what I'm thinking of, if folks, so if you could consider for web scripting, that same code for the same login, for the same registration, that's the same code we could probably use in this, just to show them that we have it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, even if Marcus hasn't discussed all of that, it's the same code.
Agreed. And the only thing is that, so while yes, you could reuse some of the code from web scripting, you have to be careful because yours is not an e-commerce system. You wouldn't have much of a problem there, and you're using like for the registration, login, etc. But if a student was building an e-commerce system and reused back the whole web scripting project and added more to it, it might create some conflicts, right? So in this case here, you won't have an issue if you just took a few of the functions there. So that's not a problem. But I agree, that's a very good point, Sheldon, because in order to sell, you could use some of the same things you have from that and make it appear that you've done these parts of it, right? Because you don't have to demo it, you just have to put screenshots only, right? And what you do is when you're describing your features that you've built, it's good to include little snippets of coding in your write-up. It shows that the student understands at a higher level. So rather than just paste back a table that says, well, I completed these functions, describe some of the things you did in completing the function, right? Give more detail, because that is how you'll get a higher mark. Merely stating that I finished these 4 functions or 5 functions is not enough, right? Next. So after you've done the functional requirements, right, the next step is state how you've implemented version control. Have you guys started backing up your work using version control?
Yes.
Good. Please note, version control is crucial. You're going to get marks for this year. So it's important that you do frequent version control, that you have a log somewhere that you could show that you have been doing your version control. It's easy for you to take screenshots of each like to show like your list of all the versions, etc. Right? You could easily see one was done yesterday, the day before, etc. Right? You should be able to get a screenshot of that, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that is a yes. Good. All right. Because you see, you have to show evidence. Not you. A lot of times students do stuff and they don't write it in and they undersell what they do. Your role is to sell more if you could. So you oversell rather than undersell what you do. So even version control, you want to show that you've already started implementing version control. Mention what you software using for version control. Show evidence of your version control. Now your description, when you're doing a version control, you should put detailed description as possible, because those are part of marking. If you document it well, like what was changes you've done since the last day, etc., those are helpful. And of course, you could, all your screenshots, you'll have your appendix if you want to include additional screenshots as well, right? So with this in mind, let's take a look at writing up the implementation chapter. Now, between me and you, I believe this is the most crucial part, because you see, what they are looking for is that you have reached far enough in the development of your application. Good. So based on this, I would, every week when you do stuff, I will take my screenshot, put it in, paste it, because just in case you lose it later on, I will take my screenshots and start putting it into my IPR body so that I could do the write-up at a later point. Okay, so make sure you're covered that, because the more you show off your implementation, the more in terms of the confidence you're giving them that you are ahead of schedule. Good. So this is the part that to me is most crucial in the IPR. So an example would be in terms of a write-up. The practical work on the application to date includes the installation and configuration of the Eclipse software. So discuss if there were any issues with the installation or configuration, and discuss how you fixed it as well. This should be to simplify rather than to simply. Let me just correct this, please. All right. To simplify the management of the application, a project folder name and whatever the name of the folder was created in Eclipse to store all the files, both the database and the application. The database tables were created manually using the information from the design phase, and the primary and foreign keys were also created. The tables were populated with data to ensure that the data types are correct and to ensure all integrity and referential integrity rules were enforced. So that's your database side. Now you go to the implementation. Now remember, you already in your functional requirements had a full list of all the things that you've implemented. What you do here, you're taking that table now, and if you want, you could use a subset of it. And for each of the functional requirements, you indicate what % complete, right? So for each one, you indicate in this section here now, you indicate the ones that the % complete for each functional requirement. So you could use the whole table and next to each, put whether it's 0%, 100%, 80%, 50%, as the case may be. Right now, you only have like one function, but every week you'll be developing more and more. So therefore, put the whole table and put, as you go along, update it to 100% or 50%, as the case may be. So the following is the status of the progress made on the list of requirements to date. The screen below illustrates the implementation of the FR1, which is create an account. And of course, you will have your screenshot. You could also include any snippet of code that you say the following code was used to store the data from the screen into my database table. Of course, other things you might include, if for example, you did the verify password with the confirm password, if you all had that, you could include that as a snippet of code as well, because you want to talk about any form of validation you're doing, you want to mention those things as well within here, right? And show evidence of the code, etc. And then see details, appendix with the details of the implementation. So what you do for each feature you implement, I will discuss it here using screenshots and mentioning as well, like any particular fixes that you had to do and any bit of coding you could as well. Next, implementation of version control. Version control was implemented using, whether it's Visual Studio Foundation services or whatever, mention what was used. Backups were done at the end of each major change to the application. And then I would have pasted a copy of the version control log here, a snippet of it, not the whole thing if it's long, but a snippet here, and send them to the appendix for the full detailed listing of your version control log. All right. So for this section here, possible items included, you could have a chapter at the end which have list requirements and the % complete, and of course the features that were done. You would have your screenshots as well there. Source code and version control could be in the appendices as well.
If I could interrupt you for a minute.
Go right ahead, Maurice.
I just keep it in mind that what this is our thinking, right? The quarter basically started. I know CTS started on June the 6th. The school itself started, from what I noted, was June the 1st, right?
Yes.
That's not a problem. But my question is, for interim reports, should we be this far already, considering that only 16 days passed? But I'm thinking practically from not just from our standpoint, I'm just thinking from their standpoint, meaning the interim report wouldn't be like a status report and we're at this point in time. So if we following proper procedure in terms of, as you'd explained before, where you're using requirements analysis, you're doing your gathering your requirements, your functional, non-functional, whatnot, you're doing your different diagrams, etc. Will we reach the stage where we coding already? But if you understand what I'm asking, I mean, I know the earlier you start and the earlier your thing is better, obviously. Or if you're ahead, is all better. But what I'm saying is, for the purposes of UH, they expect us to be heavily into the code already, to the implements. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, and here's the thing. So previously, the IPR was, you see, this project didn't just start in this module. It started from the project planning stage. A lot of what you did, a lot of like the functional requirements were already created from the very first assignment, in your project planning module, and you would have added those requirements again later on. These functional requirements, all we're simply doing is repeating them and putting them in different ways, right? So I understand in terms of what you're saying. The university, however, expects that by the time the interim progress is done, you should be around 40% complete with the application, because for them, right, the while we are trying to follow the systems development life cycle, the truth is you don't have to wait until the whole thing is finished in order to start your next phase. So even though, for example, we are still doing aspects of requirements, we are also designing the screens also and building them in the application. So the reality is that we are not fully following the structured approach. It's not like an exact following of the structured approach, because if we did, we would have to wait until week whatever to start our implementing in the application. But truthfully, they are expecting that when you are undertaking your project, the final report, you are actually coding as you go along, because they know that this application cannot be built in just a couple of weeks unless you're an expert coder, which is not expected of the students. So therefore, what they want to see is you're probably around 40% complete with the work done. Now, if you do the stuff that is described here, ideally, when we have to go to the next, when we do the final report, you will see that a lot of the chapters have already been completed, or a lot of it has already been done. You're just adding one or two extra parts as well, because like a lot of what we did there will go into your design chapter. So your design chapter, if you cover these things that I told you there, your design chapter will be about 75% complete. If you did the requirements as I indicated there, your requirements analysis chapter in the final report will be about 75 to 80% complete. It's just some extra things that we're adding onto it. Good. So that is why when you've done all of these, you are giving them the confidence that you are following a proper process, and two, that they have the confidence that your project is not at risk of failing. Because one of the major things about the interim report is to get an idea that you are on track, and to help you to report on where you are as well. So truthfully speaking, yes, you are expected to be at a certain point with your programming and with your written part, because you already defined all the requirements and stuff like that initially from the first module, which is project planning. So now here you're basically running at a faster pace now. So that's a bit of the expectation. So if you don't get a lot of it done, your marks may not be as high, because two, they will mark you based on the quality of each section, but also two, they will factor in where you are in relation to where you need to be. And if they don't have the confidence that you're far along and your project is at risk, you would likely get a lower mark. So that's why. So
Ravi, I'd just like to also say, when I spoke to my supervisor on Saturday, he actually expected me to have the part or most of the artifact finished within the next 3 to 4 weeks, actually.
Wow.
So yeah, so yes, we have to do,
catch up.
well, for me, I have to do the software and the interim at the same time.
Can I ask you who's your supervisor, just to make sure it's not the same one I have?
Kufri.
Oh, you serious? I have that same guy. All right, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and he told me he would like to see most of the artifacts or the core parts of it finished within the next
Just
3.
after, yeah, I asked myself the very same question even when we were doing project planning, because when we were doing the NAT chart was saying what we were actually putting down, we made certain progress and everything, and my mind, wait, no, we didn't reach nowhere near that, but we actually stating that in the project planning. That's what we did. So if we go in on the assumption of the project planning, it leads into this. Whatever we told them that we completed in the project planning with the NAT chart and all that, that is saying that we already reached this stage, you know.
No, well, the Gantt chart is supposed to plan out the project that you're now going to do.
Yeah, but if you look, remember, when we put how many percentage we completed and we will put a certain percentage completed, we were actually telling them we actually at this stage, in a sense. because we didn't put everything zero for the Gantt chart. We didn't put everything zero. We had actually certain percentage. We were putting like some, like a 60% or certain things. And by doing that, and what we were really saying is that we basically done all of that already, and we at this stage.
Well,
I asked myself that question.
Well, we will be covering the Gantt chart, and we'll include in the Gantt chart your progress in each item deliverable, right? But the reality is the Gantt chart, as Crystal has mentioned, is really to guide you and to show that you have a plan, because planning is really crucial to this, so that so that at the end you have an idea what it is you're going to be covering over the next few weeks, where you should be as well at any point, so that you know if you're ahead of schedule, behind schedule, that sort of thing, right?
Is the artifact and the written report due on the same day?
Yes, they are, which
Do
is
we have a date for that?
yeah, it's I think August 20 something, 26 or something.
So my question is, I know, okay, with designing of the artifact, and this keeps popping up all the time, that we do not have to actually put content into there. What we have to have is the system design, because we are the developers and not the people who are going to use the system. So would it just be like, because Marcus did this in class, like simple examples, then what I mean, if you do a course and you go to create the units fit, it's simple functionality just to make sure that the system is working.
We will have to put some content to test it and to show that we tested it and record that in our report.
Right.
Yes. So while the function is to have the feature available, you may want, even if you put the lorem epsilon, those kind of things that they put in, you don't have accurate content. What they want to do is just you could put any garbage data if you wish, but I wouldn't encourage you to put garbage data, simply because if you put proper data, it looks better, right? You know. But between me and you, whether you put the lorem epsilon or whatever it is that they write there, whatever text you put, it is just to show that yes, you can create the content. So yes, you need to show that you're creating the functions, but you also want to show that the function is working. And in order to do that, you have to do a small bit of testing, which would involve entering data as well, right?
Should our supervisor be added to our version control now?
You can if you wish. It's not a requirement, but if you are in constant contact with your supervisor and you are demoing the system to them, at some point they will. What you may find is later on, they will start asking to be part of those things, or you could suggest it as well, and where you could do a demo of the system to them. But normally that will come in closer to the end, right, where they start reviewing your application.
Okay.
Maurice,
Excuse me. Sorry.
Go right ahead. You talk to me.
I have a question concerning what you talked about before, concerning the content in each module.
Right.
If you were to use some content from a known website, let me just say, for example, Moodle, right? Let's just say you got content from Moodle concerning maths. Do you have to cite that in your references?
Now, if I'm displaying it in my page, right, ideally you should cite it just to be fair, right? But your role really is not to create like proper content. Your role is to create the functions. But in order to test it, you could mention that in order to test it, you added content that you would have used from such and such site. You could mention that in your written part of it, you can. But because that is stored in the database, it's not really going to show up anyway, right? Meaning for when they're doing the this thing, the Turnitin, your database doesn't go through a Turnitin check, so you don't have to worry about that. And it, so it wouldn't matter.
Okay, so thanks.
No problem. So guys, just to reiterate, the university, and thank you, Crystal, thank you guys as well for being part of the discussion, because remember, I don't interact with your supervisors, you all do. Mina must be grateful. Mina copies me on a lot of her correspondence to keep me updated, and I value that, but the others don't. But at least with Mina, I know and she shares the stuff so that I can share with you all as well. So that's the only one that I really, can get an idea of stuff, right? To bounce stuff off. All right. So in terms of the marks, it says for the summary of progress to date, You'll get 0 if little or no evidence of progress. You get, if it's out of 25, if it's inconsistent, some evidence of progress but lacks continuity. 10 if satisfactory, summary of progress, little implementation work. So Maurice is seeing here, little implementation work, 10. Some implementation work, 15, good summary of progress. And 20 for excellent summary of work and substantial implementation. Good. So in order to get a mark between 15 to 20, you'll have to do substantial implementation work. Good. That's why. Okay. Next. This section called ethics. How many times you guys have covered ethics? You covered ethics in your project proposal, in the first one, the very first assignment where you had to do PowerPoint. You did it again in your project planning, and you did it again so that's 2, and now you're doing it again in your IPR. And guess what? You'll have to do it all over again in your final report too. So ethical issues. Now here, the main thing they are looking at is if you are going to use humans, then you need to clearly state if you're going to use people to do questionnaires, surveys, etc. So if you are undertaking any primary research and involving human beings, you need to get ethics approval. And in this section here, you need to clearly state and demonstrate whether you're getting ethics approval or not. The main thing is you need to show that you demonstrate an understanding that you understand the university's process for ethics approval. That is the long and short of what they're looking for when they're marking here. You know the university's process for ethics approval. So that is your primary concern here. So when you start, focus on that part. And then after that, if you want to discuss any other areas of ethics as well using ethical issues, you can. But the primary purpose is whether or not you're using humans to do questionnaires, to review your application, etc. If you're not, and you're not undertaking primary research, you need to clearly state that, but indicate clearly that if you were considering primary research, that you are aware of the university's procedures regarding ethics approval, and you should describe it in a bit of detail. Good? So based on this here, right? So you're going to discuss the ethics approval here now. So I'll switch it here. So you need to review the university's procedure for ethics approval. So this is an example. Any studies involving human participants must seek ethics approval from the university's ethics committee. This is required to safeguard the dignity, rights, privacy, and health and safety of the participants, researchers, and third parties. The procedure requires applicants to submit a completed application form to the supporting appendices to the supervisor, who will review this and submit it to the ethics committee with delegated authority, which is ECDA. The application may take a minimum of 10 working days, and in some instances up to 6 weeks for the review and subsequent approval from the chairman. Given the inherent risk this may pose to this time-sensitive project, I've opted to forego ethics approval. This means research will be limited to published secondary sources, and all testing and evaluation will be conducted by the student without the need for human participants. So notice, I have clearly addressed the process for ethics approval. Because most of you are not using ethics approval, I've clearly indicated that I will not be using ethics approval. But what I've also done is indicate if I'm not using ethics approval, who is going to test, who is going to verify, who's going to evaluate the application. And I'm clearly indicating now, the student who's undertaking it will do it myself, right? So I've addressed therefore, well, if you're not doing ethics approval, how are you going to cover it? And I've clearly covered those in this here. Good. So those are example here. As indicated as well, if you wish to, you may also look at other applications of compliance with the ethics in terms of, for example, you will ensure that for proper ethics compliance, right? The protection of persons' data. So for example, to protect persons' data, you would ensure the system is compliance in both design and implementation. So this includes like having access to their data, persons having access to their data via viewing their profile, having the right to change their data or edit their profile, being able to protect persons' data using authorization schemes via username, passwords, and encryption of confidential data. So this is another example of showing compliance with ethics issues where people will only be able to view their data, but they can change the data. So for example, on Facebook, I have the right to change my personal information if I wish, because that's my data that you are storing. So I could change it. and I'm also able to, but people could only see their data through authorization schemes, etc. So these are two things you may want to cover, but the most crucial being this item here. If I could just recommend, I'd recommend switching around the order of the slide, and I'll put this one first. This is more crucial, so I will just change the order. Good. All right. It's not switching. Okay, gotcha. Good. So I just switched them around. Good. And that is your ethics chapter. After the ethics chapter, so it shouldn't take much to write your ethics chapter, right? Notice here the marking scheme. For the highest marks, excellent consideration of ethical issues and knowledge of the university's procedure in relation to ethics approval. Good. Okay. Interim report, review of your project plan. So this is the last section of it, which is your review of your project plan. Now, a challenge that we have here is that students just paste a project plan and they don't discuss the role in terms of the project plan, nor do they discuss whether, like use the plan wisely, commenting on the plan, like where am I with it, whatever, am I ahead of schedule, behind schedule, etc. So in terms of reviewing your project plan now, right? Remember, this is a work in progress and it will change as you go along. So therefore, you may have, because of setbacks, etc., certain items may have to change, the timelines may change, you may add tasks to it because you came up with new ideas, or remove tasks, etc., depending, right? So in terms of this year, I would recommend that you update your Gantt chart to include all your assessments with their due dates. Now that you know what your assessments and their due dates, include it if you haven't done so before. For each chapter of your final report, include them as well in your Gantt chart as well if you didn't have them before, right? So just a note, if you're trying to figure out what should be included in each of the report, you all have access to the shared folder, right? In the shared folder, there's all the lecture notes for the final project report. Every chapter has a separate slide and it tells you what is covered in each slide. So in each slide, you will be able to see what we're covering in the slide, right? There's a slide that tells you like what is covered in that lecture, and that will tell you what you should include for each chapter. So you can include those. So this is my recommendation as well for writing. When you're writing about the project plan, this is what you do. Discuss the changes you have made to your original project plan. For example, every new item you add, give a brief comment on it, explain why it was added, etc. Mention the ones that were added. For each item you have removed, give a reason for it. For every change you made, whether it's to a due date, etc., discuss the reason for the change. The reason is for these is you want to show that your plan is of value. Your plan is being used as well, right? State the tasks that have been completed and state what is pending. If you look at the feedback for the student who got 80, the sample report I was showing you, right? I'll pull it up here because I have it open. This is Barry's own. Barry got 80, right? And when we get to his Gantt chart, right? If you look at his Gantt chart here, right? And we go to the comments. Let me just pull the comments here for his write-up, right? These are the comments Mina had regarding the write-up. He had a very small, so even though he was using my slide, he wrote very basic, a bare amount. And look what Mina said, right? These should have been like and he just said he implemented the advanced functionality. She said you should have listed them, which ones you implemented here. Also, when reviewing your project plan against the Gantt chart, it would help if you discuss the progress on your project objectives, providing more details of tasks that were completed and what is pending. So she's telling him, right, when you're writing it up, tell me what tasks were completed, which one were pending, are you on schedule? If you're not, why are you not on schedule? What are the challenges you face? Those are the things that will make illuminating to the reader, rather than you may be ahead of schedule, but if you're writing bare amounts, even though you're giving them the confidence you're ahead, you're not writing quality. They need to see quality here. It is not just about where you are, it is also about giving them the confidence about what you write. So when you write just this basic thing, so I've given you all of these things to write about, right? And you write just this two-liner here, it's not going to serve much. And that is why he could have scored a much higher mark had he followed in terms of the guide as well. So in terms of the guide, State what tasks have been completed, what is pending, give an indication of the overall percent completed to date, and if the project is on time or ahead or behind schedule. And if you are behind schedule, what are you going to do to bring it on schedule? This is the kind of content they're looking for. Remember, it's not just about a project plan, it's not just the product, they're looking at the process. And that is why you have to be critical of your writing. So if you could follow these here and do your writing, please, it will be helpful. Of course, refer to the appendix for the new updated project plan. Example would be, start with discussing the role of the plan. The project plan serves as a roadmap for this project. Given how time sensitive the project is, it is crucial that one reviews the project plan frequently to ensure that an excellent project is delivered on time. Thus far, the project plan has been very useful in guiding my journey through the project by identifying the tasks that should be focused on each week. Right? Discuss any updates and why. Having started the IT project unit, the module guide has provided specific dates for the assignments, as well as recommended dates for meeting with supervisors. This resulted in the dates for these tasks being updated. So notice I'm accounting for which task got updated and why, because when you did the project plan, you didn't know the actual date you have to submit the project. You just had estimated dates. Now you know the actual date. You could update your plan with these. Now you know that you have to do meetings with your supervisors and their due dates. You can update your plan with those, and you mention it in your writing. Additionally, this task, and you have to mention any task that changed. This task was shifted down the project because and why, and the deadline for this task was changed by 10 days because of this reason. So you have to account for any changes you've made. Also, identify any challenges encountered with any task and how it impacted the timeline. So for example, installing the software was a challenge because of some machine capabilities. You didn't have the required amount of RAM, whatever. This, however, delayed. It took me X number of days to get the RAM and whatever, and therefore this delayed my project by 4 days or 5 days. How did I make up for the time loss? I make up for the time loss now by basically I took some vacation days from work to be able to get back on track. You know, like you account for the problem, but you account for how you went about now fixing it. This is the kind of story that they want to hear when you read your write-up. Not just about, you know, this is my project plan and it shows that I'm on par, right? Not simply that. You need to tell a proper story, right? Again, discuss any addition removal. Based on tasks completed since the EPP, there is now a comprehensive list of functional requirements. Each of these requirements varies in complexity with different duration for the completion. These were added to the Gantt chart. This inclusion resulted in the project requiring X number of additional days to be completed. In order to avoid the project exceeding the deadline now, I spent extra hours now. Each week has been allocated to the project. So you're saying now, look, I added these extra stuff. It took up extra days. But in order to combat that, what I'm doing now, I'm spending more. So if before I was doing 2 hours a day on my project, now I'm spending 3 or 4 hours per day now to ensure that I get back on track, right? Discuss your overall progress to date. Discuss the status of your project. What percent complete? According to the plan, you should currently be focusing on whatever stage. So tell me where you should be focusing on. State if you're ahead of schedule or behind. If you're ahead, suggest additional things you may consider doing with your additional time. Because if you're ahead of schedule, you have more time. What could you add on to? If you're behind schedule, what has caused this? As well as what are you going to do to bring it back on track? Please follow these guys when you're writing, because I'm not blowing my own trumpet. These are taken from those same kind of comments that students got. I've been using those to build this list of things to write about. So example will be, according to the project plan, the project is roughly 45% completed, which suggests that the project should be completed just ahead of time. This is also suggests that there will be some buffer in case of any of the tasks get delayed. The additional time would be utilized to increase the complexity of the project by including the inclusion of additional features that was not included previously. Of course, you may want to mention any of them that you didn't have, right? Based on the challenges encountered, this is just a note here. Based on challenges encountered, feel free to do an action plan that outlines what needs to be done to bring the project back. So if you are not ahead of schedule and you are behind, create a simple action plan that indicates what you will be doing in order to get back on track. Make sure you consider this if you are behind schedule, right? Okay, and in terms of reviewing of the plan, discuss the work done to complete the final report, the understanding of the requirements of the final report, you should indicate that you are guided by the assignment briefing sheet as well as the project microsite and sample report as well, right? So for this next part now, in reviewing a plan, right, the plan concludes with the submission of a written report called the final report that describes and reflects on the work carried out on the project. This report is 8,000 words in length and must be submitted as a PDF by the 20th, I believe it's the 20th of August, right? You could correct me there. The structure of the report is provided in the assignment briefing sheet with additional details found in the project planning website. The university also provides several examples of final report. These examples, together with some prize-winning one from University of Sussex, gave an excellent indication of how to interpret the structure, right? So again, here, some additional work. Thus far, work has commenced on background research, risk, legal, social, ethical, and professional issues, as well as some initial work on the design and implementation. So I'm saying what was done, right? Some additional work needs to be done to complete all the requirements analysis, such as use case and activity diagrams, as well as additional work on the design chapter to include the application of Nielsen's heuristics. The implementation, testing, and evaluation chapter also need to be completed. And then you give your example project plan. Good. So these are some examples.
Ravi?
Yep.
Question with respect, no, I know we are giving like the project plan, right? Would it be beneficial to put a work breakdown structure or task list at this point?
You definitely can. All of those are extra, like add-ons as well that you could, right? So if you do, these are nice to have, and it enhances the quality of your work. I didn't include all of them, but please note, you're not restricted to only what I have here. You could go beyond. So if you want to start with your work breakdown structure and from there you move to the other, by all means do so, because it will be helpful. Did Kufri as well recommend doing a work breakdown structure?
No, but I just can't see myself like moving forward without knowing every single thing that I need to do to get it done.
Good, then that's fine. So the work breakdown structure is an excellent starting point. So yes, you can include it, right? And I'd recommend including it before you get to the project plan. Because normally when you're teaching project plan, you normally start with a work breakdown structure and from there you develop your planner. I didn't do that because it wasn't a mandatory requirement like in some of the project planning unit. So because it wasn't, I didn't bother to add it on. In earlier years, I did include work breakdown structure in the project planning, but eventually I started removing it because of the number of different things students are working on. So to make it more manageable, but definitely you can include it. All right. Now, in terms of the marking scheme for the review of the project plan, it says here that little or no evidence, 0 marks, some evidence of project planning, but vague, 5 marks, satisfactory, concise, coherent, 10 marks, 15 out of 20 is good, concise, and coherent project plan, clearly defined tasks and timelines with minor errors. And for 20, excellent, concise, and coherent project plan with clearly defined tasks and timelines. Okay, so timelines should also be, show proper planning as well as taking place. Your last section now is your conclusion. And in terms of the conclusion, right? So given the interim report allows you to comment on your progress to date, your conclusion should briefly discuss overall if you are on track to completing the project on time, any significant challenges that impacted you, and as well as what are your key focus in order to get the project done. So like what lies ahead, right? So based on this here now, your conclusion will be the project planning module provides an excellent foundation for the undertaking of the IT project. Therefore, it's not about starting from zero, but really continuing the work that was already done. The biggest area of concern was the development of the software artifact. However, to overcome this, a lot of additional time was spent reviewing online tutorials to get the application on track. The software artifact is about 40% complete, and is well on the way to completion. The creation of the ER diagram was also a bit of a challenge. However, this was addressed by reviewing similar solutions found online, as well as lecture notes from Connolly and Begg. So I'm describing to them, I'm summarizing now my whole thing. Now, all of these challenges should have been mentioned before, but I'm summarizing to conclude. This is the last part of your report. and you can close with a conclusion. It's just like 2 paragraphs at most, summarizing what you've done, but basically giving the notion of where you're 40% complete, I'm on track, these were some of the challenges and how I overcome them, and now I'm seeing what is next. So the next step is to formalize the final report. It is expected that each week, 1 to 2 chapters will be completed to ensure completion of the final report ahead of schedule. Given the project is slightly ahead of schedule for now, greater emphasis or focus will be placed on enhancing the user experience of the artifact. And that is the end of your report. And then you go now to your references, right? And after your references, you'll have your appendices as your last part. Now for your references, you should have as much references as you can. Now remember, you guys created a list of references from your project planning module. Use those again if you have to as well, as much as you can. Excellent referencing and use of technical terms, few if any mistakes. So this is for referencing. I want to just reiterate something here for you guys as well, right? Now, whenever you're referencing, please remember the following. When you're writing, it's Harvard referencing uses the author year. Either the author is out of the bracket and the year in the bracket, or both the author and the year in bracket. How do you know which one is best or which one is correct? The rule of thumb is this. When you write it, right, ignore what is in bracket and read it. So for example, the year is in bracket here. If I ignore what is in bracket and I read this, it would make sense. Fisher suggests motivation research should establish a personal construction of employees. That makes sense if I ignore what is in bracket. If, however, I had put the bracket here, right? If I done this, right? If I were to read it and ignore what is in bracket, it would read, suggests motivation research should establish personal construct of employees. That does not make sense. So therefore, I would not use that approach. So therefore, this is preferred. Look at another one. In this one here now, notice, if you ignore what is in bracket, when researching employee motivational, personal constructs should be investigated. That's a proper sentence. The full stop goes after. Some students put the full stop before. The full stop has to go after. The reference has to be within, or the citation has to be within the sentence before the full stop. Now, if you didn't do it like this, and let's suppose now you took off this here and you put just the year in bracket, right? Then if you ignore the year, let's see if it made sense. When researching employee motivation, personal construct should be investigated, Fisher. That doesn't sound right. So therefore, in this case, you need to have both of them in bracket. And that's simply, when you read your work, you should be able to just, if you just use that simple rule, you will be able to tell if it's correct or not, in terms of whether you put the author name in bracket or to leave it out. I'm still reading a lot of students putting, using the wrong approach. But as I said, use this as your first part. And of course, use your other guides as well. Okay, so this is one author. If using one author, you do it like this. If it's two author, you put, and it's outside of the bracket, it'll be like Courtney and do, the word and. Of course, because when you ignore what is in the bracket, and you should this too, right? Okay. So those are examples. And of course, more than two authors use et al. Dot. Notice the dot comes after the al. Okay. So those are some referencing examples. So that brings us to the end of our interim progress report tutorial. Are there any specific questions you guys would like to ask as well regarding it? Okay, what I want to do, and you can ask while I'm doing this, I want to look at the share drive, please, right? Just a note regarding the share drive and how this stuff is organized, right? There's a sample Gantt chart that you could use here if you wish, and starting from here, and you could fix and build if you don't have a Gantt chart. The UH lecture notes, like anything Ghani, or like, for example, I sent you something from Mina, that will go in the UH lecture notes. So notice in the IPR, if it's related to the IPR, like the stuff Mina just sent us, that I emailed you all yesterday, it's included here. Previously, Ghani gave a structure for the interim report as well. All of that is included here. And Ghani also had an example of an interim. So if there's an example interim report here, right? This here, Ghani IPR example with feedback. This here is an example of an IPR that Ghani provided to us from a student. It's a good one. It has some comments of correction as well. So I would encourage you to review some of these as well so that you get ideas. You know, it's very tastefully done by the student. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there are error or no errors in these. There are often errors in some of these with citation, etc., and things like those, but you can always enhance it. Now, just to go, this is what Mina had sent, right? So these are some stuff Mina would have sent as well, right?
Ravi,
yeah.
that link to the video, does anybody have that video they would like to share with us?
Which
that
video?
Mina did.
Oh, well, Mina, I send the link, but only Mina student have access to it. So somebody would have to either download it and put it on YouTube and share it or something, or you can download it and, yeah. So that's the only thing, but I don't have access to it because it's only for her student that she has given access to, right?
Okay.
But you have the handouts from it though, right? That she would have mentioned. The next
Ravi, the changes that you make to this, the most recent changes you make to this slide, you could send us it in an email or anything, or you just update in the folder.
No, I always email it to you. So if you notice, every week when I send you the link to the video, I also send you back the IPR lecture notes again. Is this?
You mean after class?
After class. So after class, this video would be sent to you guys as well, right? The recording, I would upload it to YouTube, and I will also attach back the IPR notes again, right?
Yeah, because I noticed the one from last week changed to the one this week in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and it's right here now. So if we go back now, so that's the UH notes, right? So anything from them goes there. The module guide, you're familiar with what the module guide is, right? So this is your module guide for the CS and IT project. Is the same thing pretty much. These are samples of IPR from students. So IPR samples are samples from students. Now I shared one of them with you, Barry, but there are others here for you all to use, right? So these are, and all of these would have gotten in the 70s to 80s, right? For those. Then this is when we're going to do the final report, these are FPR samples. So these are final, so all of those, these are samples for the final report, but I'm not doing these as yet, right? Because right now we're focusing on the IPR. But when we're doing the final report, you already have, look, I got 6 for you here. Then apart from that here now, this is my lecture notes here. So CTS lecture note. Now, in terms of my lecture notes are focused on the assignments. So this one here is your first class, which is the introduction, right? And this is the IPR. So in the IPR folder, I only have one slide here. This is the IPR tutorial, right? So this is the slide that I am working on. So if I were to close it off here, right? So I'm closing it off, saving it, right? So these slides here are in your IPR folder. So this is it over here. So this is your IPR file here. Notice, because I close it off now, you only have one file. So every week I've been working on your IPR tutorial. So it's one file, but are covered over multiple weeks. Now that we finished the IPR, when after you have handed up your IPR, then we will start work on your FPR. So for your FPR, I've already included all your chapters here. I will make subtle changes as we go along, but whenever I make it, it's always here. So you could always, my recommendation is, whenever you need to review it, go back to the online folder and always use this because it's always the latest version. Good? So these are each chapter. There are 10 chapters, and I've included each of them here, as well as a file with the structure of the final report. Okay? And so this is the shared drive. So therefore, based on this here, and by the way, when you're writing your functional requirements, I added 3 examples of the functional requirements here. So this is the CTS note, and this is your assignments here, right? So this is the about you. I didn't put the IPR assignment here as yet. I'll have to download it and put it here for you all. So this is your shared folder. So the videos, I don't store the videos here, but the videos are on YouTube. And you guys have the link for the videos, okay? So that concludes now our overview of the shared drive. And what I will do, I'm gonna finish off class now. I'll take your questions, then I'll end the recording. After it's converted, I'll upload, share the link, and send you the updated IPR slides. But the IPR slides are in here. It's under the lecture notes, CTS lecture notes under IPR. This is where you get your IPR lecture notes from, right? Good. Any other question before we close off class, guys?
So in the event, just hypothetically speaking, in the event that you find, like, let's say you're a little behind with regards to certain aspects obviously would, I guess in this case, would more than likely be the artifact, right? I'm just saying, you
Right.
see
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
why
That's understandable.
somebody responded earlier on and they said that, the supervisor said that by the end of the 3 weeks, and I understand, and don't take offense, whoever it is, right? All of us in the same kind of boat for the time being, at least anyway. For the next 3 weeks, you should have artifact ready, which is, I know, is what Marcus is also aiming for. So I understand that. But what I'm saying is, by the date of the submission for the IPR, we wouldn't be there yet in terms of where the artifact will be, right? Because remember, there's still a little curve, and you're still trying to flesh out, as Shalon said, in terms of, or somebody else said, in terms of like some of your requirements, you might change, you'll alter, those kind of things. You're tweaking them because you're supposed to be kind of still in the stage of doing all the logical design and all that kind of thing, because those things will get you to kind of flesh out more in a more granular detail what um what you're actually going to design. Now, I'm not saying we wouldn't have nothing done in terms of the artifact. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying. So what I'm saying is, because of the timeline with regards to the date of submission for the IPR versus where we will actually be in terms of the artifact itself, can I simply say that I'm behind and the steps that I take to correct that,
You can.
to be able to get the marks, or no?
Yes, you are.
Or thinking about it wrong?
No, you're correct. You may not be where you are with the artifact, but overall with the project. Now remember, the project is not just an artifact. Your project is including the written parts as well. So while in terms of the artifact, you may have only done implemented some of the functional requirements, you may have made major headway with all the other phases, the design and all of those based on what we've done. So overall, you might be 40% complete with the project overall, but only 30% with the artifact, because the artifact is a subset of the overall thing. Good?
Because that's what I'm kind of pensive, because when you all mentioned, especially the person who spoke and say where we reach in with regard, where we supposed to be with regards to the artifact itself, I'm saying is, yes, that is also true. But remember, you're talking 3 weeks from now. But the submission date is 10 days. Well, let's call it today done. So let's say 9 days from now, right? So there's no way in 9 days, unless you dedicated to that 24 or 365 for the next couple of days, 24/7, that you could submit.
Don't overthink it, Maurice, because even in the past, the students were the same thing as you all as well. So remember, you all are not unique. All the past, those that got 80 and all of that, they were pretty much the same thing. Because remember, every semester Marcus is doing the same thing. And after third week or whatever, he's reached the same place as well. Good? So it's nothing to be overly worried about. Remember, even when students finish the whole module, students who have gotten 80s overall as well only had like 5 and 6 functions available, right? But they had a really good report. And that's what I'm saying. If you could create a really good report overall, your report is going to be marked. But of course, you need to have some sense of work done on your artifact. And even though it might just be a few functions, don't be too taken up thing about it as well. But the fact is, you need to have evidence of an artifact somewhere along the way, right?
No, agreed. I understand. I just kind of thinking aloud now.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I interject a little bit? Maurice, I hear where you're coming from, because I don't think you did web scripting last semester, right?
Right.
And I could see where, because if I had not done web scripting, I would have probably felt the same way. But looking at the approach that Marcus is coming from, if you just follow his, like what he did last week with the first week with the registration and the login, and what he told, like just follow what he doing now for the basics,
right?
And you will have more than enough. Because when I look at what some of the other people submitted for their IPRs, they didn't have much detail in their artifact itself, but the actual the written part of it, of where they wanted to go, was a lot more detailed and made a lot more sense. So like they just had snippets of their login, their registration, their ER diagram. So if you follow that, so it's not like if that thing about the artifact being ready in 3 weeks, we know that's not like humanly possible. But at least if you follow what Marcus actual outline, because he said his first month we're gonna be doing, like, we'll have the basic built.
Right.
You'll have more than enough screenshots and code to put into your RPR.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's what you're
Yeah,
saying. I know you're trying to promote easier. I just looking at what your supervisor said versus the timeline. So if you're kind of
okay, it's my supervisor. This is Crystal here. So he
right,
said that he wants to see something in the next 3 weeks. He did
right,
not say he wants to see the final artifact in the next 3 weeks, but he would like to see something because he asked me what did I do so far, and I told him the registration and login, and he said, okay, so I want to see something working in the next 3 weeks.
right.
So it does not mean that I need to go and rush and do the whole artifact in the next 3 weeks, but the core functionalities need to be there at least.
Right.
So don't think about it as though you need to finish this in the next 3 weeks. No, that's not what they're asking for.
yeah. And yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
agree totally. So my suggestion now is focus on the overall the report while you're also doing you have to multitask, right? And
Right.
so you do need stuff Marcus have done. So you have 2 more classes with Marcus before that date, right? So Marcus will, in total you'd have had three classes or 4 classes with Marcus now by that date, four programming sessions. And if you want to do more, Marcus has his videos, and I send the link to his videos already as well, right? So you have all of those also. You could use the videos and do additional functions if you wish, but don't do those at the expense of doing a good written report. Your overall IPR has to be solid, and therefore you need to focus on everything, because your project is not just an artifact, it is everything included. So therefore, you have to spend your time on both aspects in order to get a good quality report. You don't need to be a strong programmer, but if you're a really good writer and you can write all those stuff as well, you'd find that you could score a really high mark. But of course, there must be some evidence of the artifact. And the more you could add, the better, of course, it is, right?
Understood. Thanks a lot, thanks a lot, Crystal.
Okay. Guys, I want to say how grateful I am for the interaction and engagement as well, because really the teaching part of it and you adding your share of experience as well is really helpful, which is what I'm really trying to create as well. So thank you very much. That concludes our session for today. Now, note the following. I want to apologize. So Saturday, I realized I found out some of you were in this session on Saturday for my link. But remember, we move our Saturday session so Marcus could have the full 3 hours on Saturday. But I should have sent an email to reiterate that as well. So my sincere apologies regarding that. Now, our classes are on Tuesday. So next week, I'll have one to help persons with ER diagramming, etc. But after that, we would have no further class until the IPR has been submitted. After the IPR has been submitted, then I will resume classes again on Tuesday, but I will inform you. So really from now, if you don't need help with the ER diagram, etc., you could just focus on getting your project written and prepared, etc. And you could schedule a one-on-one with me if needed. And so that's my recommendation in going forward. And our next class would be after the IPR, which would likely be, so the first Tuesday after the IPR would be the 30th of June, right? Is that correct?
So basically you're saying, so next week we're doing
Yes.
the ER diagram, and then the next official class is the 30th.
Yes, because the IPR would have been submitted by then. So we start work on a final report from the 30th.
Great.
Good? All right. Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.
Sorry, Ravi, I just have one question with respect to the functionality, requirements, right? I noticed that you have it, like, log in and you put the description, right? Are we going to be breaking down the functionality, like with respect to password encryption and those kind of things?
You can include, well, you're just mentioning that you would be encrypting passwords, etc. So you can include those if you wish. Yes. So each of your functionality, you describe it in a bit more now. Password encryption would be part of, like, in terms of maybe a non-functional rather than a functional. What a functional is something like you could click on any menu to get access to, etc. Right? Password encryption is more like behind the scenes. So it is therefore considered more like a non-functional for security. So that will go under security. So you can describe it if you wish, yes. That is what I'm recommending. So each requirement, you just put some more description on it so that they can understand and see. And that description helps the guide when you're doing a design, so you can actually see the fields on the page, etc.
Okay, because how I learned the functionality, and you each functionality you break it down, and then that's how you get the information to be able to test, right?
Right.
So part of your test is to test the password encryption, right? So
Right.
that's why I was asking to see if it makes sense to break it down from just login or sign up to the actual little bits of functionality or non-functional items.
All right, and my answer is yes, you should, and I want to explain why. Because these here are linked to testing, right? When you're going to test your application, you're testing the functionality. Now, let's use a small example. I have to go back to just to pull this for you, right? And I want to show you here. So when you're doing, let's look at your functional requirements here. So I'm just gonna just give me a second. Let me just pull up the. Right. Okay, so this here is a functional requirement, create an account, but without any description, you don't know what validation is being done. So you can't tell, like, for example, do you have to, does it validate for strong passwords, all of that? So it doesn't give you much detail. When you go to the description now one, so if you describe a functional requirement with detail, like here, in creating an account, in describing it, I'm saying user must create an account. It requires them to enter their name, email, and password, and a confirmed password. The username must be unique. So this here, the username must be unique. When I'm testing, I'm not just testing that you could create an account. I'm also testing to ensure that the username is unique. So one of my tests will also check to see that it tests to ensure that the username is unique so that you cannot use the same username twice. I'll also check to ensure that a strong password, so it will verify the password is a strong password and it doesn't accept weak password. I'll also test that the password and confirm password match, etc. Right? So this description is going to help me. So when I'm writing my testing now, I can describe my test in more detail because I'm describing here what should be in the screen. So this is helping me to see all the fields. So this is telling me I need a name, email, and password, and confirm password in my create account. So I'm picturing my create account screen and I'm seeing those 4 fields. I'm also, when I'm building it, I'm seeing what validation needs to be done. And this will also help me when I'm writing my testing, that I'm testing these things as well, that the password is unique, that the username is unique, and the password is a strong password. So yes, you should include this detailed description because it's helping you in every one of those other phases.
Okay, so all right, so the functional requirements is to create an account, and in the description is where I would put in the fact that it's going to have password encryption, and that is what I would also use for the expected results in the test script.
Correct. So when you're doing a test script, you would have, yes. So when you're writing a testing chapter, you would have, and I'll just do as we on it. I just want to go to the testing chapter so you can get a little.
Ravi, 1 second before you go there. That little chart or table that was in the body of the report, and because it's a table, the words wouldn't be for word count. That wouldn't matter.
It wouldn't include in the word count, right? So you're not including the tables in your word count.
All right, good.
This is your testing chapter, and this is testing the create an account, right? So when you actually testing create an account, look at the actual, so although this is one function, look at the different tests. So one is you'll test the ability to create an account. So you register John Doe with email address and password. You expect that the customer will be registered, right? And you record the actual outcome. Now, this is another test. I'm testing another customer, Marvin Jones, with the same email address. Why am I using back the same email address? Because no 2 users should have the email address as your username. It should be unique. So the rule here is a message indicating that the email address already exists, registration not allowed. So I'm testing now uniqueness of email address because I mentioned that the username is unique. Well, I should have mentioned the email address is unique really, right? register another customer, Jane Child, but the password is a weak password. It's not a strong password. What I expect is a message indicating that the password is not a strong password. And so if I test this with this, I'm expecting that you will get a message that it is not a strong password and they should enter a new password instead, right? So this, you're seeing how that same thing now is informing my testing, right? So what you described is informing the testing here. So yes, it is going to be included as well, right?
Okay, yeah. All right, cool.
All right, guys. So any other question before we close off? All right.